Hi, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are located. This is the session 1.3. We are talking about enhancing NDC and energy roadmap. This is the session that you'll be now listening. I am your moderator, and my name is Anindya Bhattacharya. I am right now based in India, and I have my presenters and colleagues, panelists who will be joining me in this discussion. So before we start, let me just give you a quick background that what we are going to discuss in this very interesting and timely session. This is related to the nationally determined contribution, NDC, and the energy roadmap of this region. And as all you know that this is part of the Paris Agreement, and world really needs to focus on achieving these targets at this 1.5 or 2-degree target. So now NDCs is a very important steps towards that, and the technologies in that context, because today's discussion will be mostly focusing on how the energy roadmap and the different technologies are going to help the countries to achieve the NDC target. So the idea would be that innovative technologies and business models are needed by the different countries to facilitate and expedite the transition, and infrastructural investment must be future-proof regarding the rapid technological evolution and climate change. But in that context, NDC and SDG, and especially SDG 7, are very important. And here in these sessions, we'll be discussing that how the countries are basically moving towards that. Their presentations will be on that. We'll be evaluating the progress of different countries and the region in this context, as well as my presenters who will be quickly introducing themselves before they start. And they will also talk about different technologies which are very important in this context. Also, we cannot, complete these discussions and touch upon the issues of the current pandemic that is going on. And as you know, that is going to take a huge impact, create a huge impact on not only on the economy, but also the technological pathways, because there is a lot of new technology that's going to come up after this pandemic is over. Hope we can recover from that very soon. But it is not going to define or not going to basically soften the kind of importance of this NDC achievement, because this is creating a huge impact for the future development and the sustainable development. So I'll not take much time to give a quick background of this, and I'll just give you a quick idea that how the sessions will run through. So there will be 3 presentations in this session, the first half, and then in the second half of this session, we'll have a panel discussion. The first presentation will be made by me, and then I have my co-presenters also who will be presenting, Mr. V, and also Celia and Max. They will be presenting their topics as well. So, now let's start this discussion, and I appreciate that if you can interact with us. As you know, this is the first time we are having this SEF in a virtual mode, and I must thank and congratulate ADB and the sponsors who has supported this massive initiative to make it virtual. And this proves that how dedicated the whole world is towards the achievement of our sustainable development goals and achieving the low carbon technology pathways. So without wasting time, yep. So basically, I'll be talking about implementing NDC and SDG 7 in Asia, low carbon technology development pathways. This is a part of a ongoing technical assistance program supported by ADB. And so this is basically, in this presentation, we'll be covering mostly the status of SDG 7 NDCs, scope of these studies, uh, what is the regional scenario in terms of the energy and technology mix, what is the national baselines, and so on and so forth. So, so this is the kind of idea that is going to give that where we stand in terms of the different SDG 7 targets. It shows that this is the clean cooking access. This is recently came up in the climate action tracker published by SMAP a couple of years back. It shows that what is the different regional progress of in achieving the access to clean cooking, which clearly shows that in this part of the world, we are more or less halfway through to go to the full clean cooking solution. In terms of the access to electricity, you can see that more or less the globally the countries are almost going towards the 100% achievement, except sub-Saharan Africa. But this is one indicator where the globally the things really went well as of now in terms of SDG 7. Now, in terms of the renewable energy penetration, things you can easily see from this slide that on an average it is, except sub-Saharan Africa where a lot of biomass and biofuels are used, biomass is used, except that majority of these region are more or less within 20 to 30%. Globally, the average is only 17%. So now this is quite an interesting one. This shows that how I have actually adopted this slide from this climate action tracker, which clearly shows that which countries are basically how they have actually put their NDC targets and what is the kind of their sufficiency level in terms of their approach, in terms of their targets, in terms of their the process. So it clearly shows that the country like Vietnam, they could have done much better compared to their existing NDC targets. Like China, like Japan, they're all falling into the highly insufficient region. That means their target is comparatively less compared to their the capacity or the potentiality to achieve more. In terms of the insufficiency, I think there are a lot of countries like Brazil, EU is also falling in that. But in that context, it is that India, country like India, Bhutan, they are really doing well in terms of achieving the 2-degree target. That is primarily because of India's high renewable energy penetration target. As you know, it is already 175 gigawatt of target that has been set by the government. So this clearly shows these slides that how the global performance is happening in terms of the SDG 7 and NDC target achievement. So it clearly indicates that things are moving in that direction. There is a lot of hope that we'll be able to do, but it is also clear that a lot of additional effort is still required. Now, this slide shows that how the gaps are. I just picked up a couple of countries for the quick kind of understanding. You can see the dotted lines. That is basically the reference line, which is on that basis, country has identified the NDC. So it clearly shows that the Vietnam, they could have easily done much better in terms of. So these slides clearly indicates that how the countries can actually identify more stringent or additional NDC measures compared to their baseline. So this is just a comparison slide. So it will give a good idea that where the countries are in terms of their reference and in terms of their achievement so far. Now, so basically, it now what needs to be done. So basically, there are a couple of things that are really needs to be in place as soon as possible. So it indicates that advancing SDG 7 implementation top priority for clean cooking is required. Enhanced electricity access, though the access is already in a good shape, but still needs some additional measures. Then accelerated RE penetration is required, and the financing and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of 4 steps that we are expecting, that these are the kind of solutions to achieve the SDG targets. Now, in terms of the goal and the objective of the project, now the specific that we are right now working under this technical assistance program, we are basically working towards sorry, working towards the basically 4 pillars of it, that develop the energy mix outlook and the technology pathways for the selected sub-regions, develop low carbon energy technology roadmap for the selected countries, and then develop low carbon energy pilot projects, and then the knowledge and the basically creating the knowledge dissemination products. Now, so in terms of the methodology, we are, I'm not going into too much detail of the methodology, but we are using a kind of a model, the energy systems optimization model, which was developed by IASA, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, but it is now an open source model, which is called the Message IX. And we are basically putting these SDG 7 and SDG target indicators, and we are implementing these in the model to analyze that how this is going to work out in terms of achieving this target in this region. So I will directly go into some of the results that we obtained. That will give you a idea that where we stand in terms of, but these results are still indicative and subject to further revisions. But it clearly shows that where we stand. So this is the regions that we have covered. The East Asia, there are 5 regions that we have covered. So it clearly shows that the fossil fuels are the predominant fuels until foreseeable future. Coal as a resource is expected to lose its importance in the mix. That is very, very good sign in terms of the low carbon thing. Oil is the single largest energy source of many regions in Asia, and renewable is far behind the expected level of use in the region. So it is one area where a lot of effort and the policy support is required. Now, except Central and South Asia, gas use is limited in the other regions. So the natural gas is also not coming up in that level of expectation. And East Asia region is expected to get its energy peak by 2040. You can see that that is mostly driven by Chinese growth and development and implementation of various energy efficiency measures. And so there is a peak is expected during 2040. Now, in terms of the electricity generation, you can see in the region that fossil fuels are the predominant fuels for power generation. Coal-based electricity is expected to lose its importance in the mix. So a lot of gas-based generation is coming up. Renewable is far behind the expected level. And access to electricity in the region might be limited, or growth of transport sector and its corresponding consumption of energy has also outperformed other sectoral growth. So in terms of the energy consumption, I think the transport is going to be the main sector who will be drawing, pulling the whole demand of oil in the market. Now, I'll just quickly take you through the national baseline assessments. What we have done, there are 6 countries that we are assessing: Bangladesh, China, India, Vietnam, Pakistan, and Indonesia. These are the mix of primary energy supply that we are expecting between 2020 and 2030. We have just only taken during the NDC implementation period. So, which clearly shows that, you can see from the side that the coal is still predominant in majority of the countries. Like Bangladesh is going to use a lot of coal. China is already in the coal. India is also still having some scope of coal. Vietnam is also having coal. But in that context, renewable energy is still coming in a very lower percentage, at least until 2030. So, which is one area there, needs a lot of attention in the coming years. Now, in terms of electricity generation mix, again, you can see that except one or two countries, coal is still the major source of energy, electricity generation for this region, for these countries. But for countries like China and India, a lot of renewable energy is expected to come. So, in terms of the share of renewables in the electricity mix, there is a lot of hope for the countries like China and India, and also, we see the countries like Pakistan and also some part of Indonesia. We are seeing that in the later part of the 2020s, like 2025 onward until 30, the gas is also going to come up in the generation mix. So, in terms of the percentage mix, you can see that it is still predominantly the fossil fuel, but renewable is coming up in one or two countries. But this needs to be, strengthened in all other countries and the region, so that we can achieve the SDG and NDC targets. Now, this is a quick indicators that we have identified from this assessment so far, that how the indicators of SDG 7 are going. It clearly shows that clean cooking share is increasing in all the countries. So there is a clear indication that countries are performing and moving towards the right direction. In terms of the baseline, that renewable energy share to final energy, we have identified that uh, in certain cases like India, Pakistan, China, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, the share of renewable energy to the final energy consumption is increasing. But for Vietnam, we are expecting certain decline because there is a shifting from biomass to the modern fuels. So this is quite encouraging in that way. Third, electricity consumption to final energy demand, which is also a very important indicator that how we are moving towards more cleaner energy use. So all these countries are showing a lot of progress, except we found certain drop, minor 1 or 2% drop in Chinese case, but majority of the countries are basically moving towards. For China case, I can mention that this might be the reason of you know very high level of energy efficiency improvement, so that electricity consumption is expected to go down by a certain percentage over the period of time. Now, in terms of the primary energy per unit of GDP, which is another indicator of the efficiency, all the countries are showing a decline except Bangladesh. The reason being that we found that this country is moving more towards from biomass and the non-conventional, the biomass basically to the modern fuels. So there is still some kind of a increasing trend in terms of energy use per unit of GDP. So it basically invites energy efficiency program in the country. Now, finally, the energy consumption per capita, electricity consumption per capita. This is also an indicator that it is increasing for all countries in the region, ensuring improving access to the modern energy. So the more you have access to per capita electricity, you can imagine that it indicated that people are using more and more electricity and modern fuels. So finally, in terms of the emission, what we found that all the countries are, the third column is the NDC target, which is set by the government in their documents, and this is the model projected baseline scenario. So you can see that 2020 Bangladesh is around 70 MTCOE, million ton carbon equivalent. 2016, 2030 it is going to be 2016, so it is more or less achieving the NDC target. China, a little short of 15,000. India is definitely is going to achieve, because the target was 6,000, but it is going to achieve almost 4,426. Indonesia targeted 1750, but it is expected to shoot up by to 2100. Pakistan is also is going to achieve this target easily, and same as Vietnam is also going to achieve the target. So this clearly indicates that that what is the difference between the target set under NDC and what is the kind of the potential emissions that might happen by 2030. So it is a indication that countries are moving to the right direction, but still efforts are required. Now we need to, this is my final slide. So basically the balanced approach for NDC, that we need to have a region has to set a ball, region has already set the ball rolling towards the low carbon development. Renewable energy share is not increasing in the region as it was expected. It is evident that it is additional support is required. NDC targets in the region are often achievable and thus can be revised with higher emissions reductions. Post-COVID-19 pandemic, regional economy will be very weak and thus the initial target achievement might be affected. Thus, cost-based priority of mitigation actions will be important. Now, the demand-side mitigation measures are often less expensive but less important in the NDC target. We observe that most of the NDC targets are in the supply side of energy, but the demand-side targets are less costly. So it is important that the focus and the target should be the quantifiable target-based demand-side management is introduced. The demand-side target-based NDC could be the low-cost mitigation options for the countries. And finally, renewable energy requires continuous policy support for its achievement. And however, storage technologies could be the game changer that can fast-track the implementation of renewable energy. So, so I'll stop here. So this is my presentation, and my the next two presentations are basically will take out from here, where we'll be talking about the technologies of different renewables, and I'm sure that there will be a clear link between my presentation, which I put up in such a way so that it can set the background of this discussion, and my next presenters will be taking it there from here. So I'll hand over my mic to Mr. Wee for your presentation. Please introduce yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Adias. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Wei Zhou. I'm from Energy Policy Research Group, University of Cambridge. Today, I'm going to present a very short preliminary study that we have undertaken on the topic of the prospect of hydropower to hydrogen in developing countries in Asia and Pacific, using Nepal as the case. Oops. Okay. Nepal is the least developed country facing quite critical energy challenge. The country's energy mix is dominated by biofuels, waste, and imported petroleum. In its final energy consumption, the share of electricity is very low, less than 4%. While the country has a very high commercially available hydropower resources, the actual total amount of installed capacity of hydropower was very low. It's around 1.1 gigawatts by the fiscal year 2019. So this level is certainly not sufficient to meet the peak demand. A key issue here is the high fluctuation and the seasonality of the power generated by the run-of-river hydropower plants. Often during the dry winter season, there's a critical shortfall in the power capacity. As a result, the total electricity consumption by the country is very low. In the meantime, the per capita electricity consumption of Nepal has remained quite substantially lower than the neighboring developing countries in this region. In recent years, some encouraging progress has been made by the Nepal government. In 2019, a total of 340 power purchase agreements were signed with independent power producers. Electricity has been imported from India to Nepal to bridge the gap of supply and demand. In 2018, the government issued a white paper called Energy, Water Resources and the Irrigation Sector's Status and the Roadmap for the Future. where some quite ambitious targets were set, such as total installed capacity of hydropower resources reaching 3 gigawatts in 3 years, 5 gigawatts in 5 years, and 15 gigawatts in 10 years. Beyond electricity, in the broader context of total final energy consumption, in 2017, for example, the residential sector consumed the most amount of energy, followed by transport sector and the industry sector. For industry sector in particular, the sector is heavily dependent upon imported oil products. And so there's a very low level of energy diversification of the transport sector. The share of oil accounts for nearly 100%. In fact, transport sector assume the majority share of the total oil products by Nepal economy. And this percentage was as high as 67% in year 2017. As far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned, transport sector account for over 12% from Nepal's total energy-related greenhouse gas emissions in 2011. If CH4 and N2O are not considered and only CO2 is considered, increased to more than 45% in 2017. Therefore, promoting electric vehicles has been identified by the Nepal government as one of the priorities in its strategies, including Nepal's nationally determined contribution, where the aim is to reduce the transport sector's dependency on fossil fuel by 50% by year 2050. So the situation here in Nepal is the abundance of hydropower resources, seasonality of electricity generation, surplus during the wet season, and shortage during the dry season. A possible solution is to store the surplus electricity that would otherwise be curtailed in order to mitigate the shortage during dry season, and also to decarbonize the transport sector as well as other end-use sectors. On the left is the so-called renewable to power pathway, where hydrogen is produced through electrolysis using renewable energy and stored in different ways, whereby short-term, seasonal, or long-term reserve for re-electrification and other end uses can be made possible. Such a time shifting with hydrogen can help to avoid curtailment of variable renewable energy and also enhance the security of power supply. In addition, electrolyzers can serve as a variable controllable load for frequency regulation, and therefore add some flexibility to the power system with large share of renewable energy. On the right side is the renewable to mobility pathway, where the hydrogen produced by electrolysis process is used to power fuel cell electrical vehicles, FCEVs, to provide a low carbon mobility option. As suggested by literature, the driving performance of FCEVs is already sort of comparable to conventional vehicles. For medium to long duty, to high duty, duty cycle applications, the performance of FCEVs can be better as compared to batteries in terms of weight, driving range, and refueling time. While for the moment, FCEVs remain expensive with limited availability, but the total cost of driving is likely to be dropping quite quickly. So by 2030, 2040, there is the possibility of reaching cost parity with hybrid vehicles. This is just another graph illustration of the possible hydrogen value chain in Nepal. So for the moment, globally, electrolysis plays a very minor role of the global hydrogen products, mainly through chemical process. For electrolysis, there are three main technologies, three main types of electrolyzer, including alkaline, ALK, protein exchange membrane, PEM, and solid oxide electrolysis cells, SOEC. ALK is the most established technology, fully mature and commercially available, whereas SOEC is the least mature, still at demonstration stage. The levelized cost of hydrogen production is in fact a function of electrolyzer load factor and electricity cost. The combined effect of these two factors is a nearly flat curve of levelized cost of hydrogen when the load factor is in the range of 40% to roughly 80%. When there is availability for surplus renewable electricity with near zero cost, which otherwise would be curtailed, the effect of capex and opex of electrolyzers will be substantially dominant when the load factor is low or medium. A study by DNV shows that with zero cost surplus electricity available for over 3,000 hours and operating hours above 2,100 hours, the levelized cost of hydrogen production through electrolysis can be comparable with the dominant method in the industry, steam methane reforming method. In terms of the storage cost for the mobility option, the pressurized container is the most common option for small-scale mobile and stationary application. Whereas for the hydropower to power option, which requires large volume and long-term storage, subsurface storage of the gaseous hydrogen may not be feasible for Nepal because of the constraint of geological condition. So as a potential alternative, chemical storage through converting hydrogen to ammonia may be a cost competitive option. So in terms of the levelized cost of electricity generation for load balancing, the competitiveness of hydrogen power plants over gas-fired power plant really depends on the hydrogen price, gas price, and potential carbon prices. So to be able to estimate hydropower to X potential in Nepal, we have made a series of assumptions. And first of all, the hydropower capacity targets in the future have been discounted to be sort of more practical, more realistic. We assume that the discounted target will be the realization of 3 gigawatts by 2025 and 8 gigawatts by 2030. Having said that, this may still be overly optimistic. In terms of estimating the possible surplus hydropower, we have taken a simplified approach because we didn't do any sophisticated modeling, detailed engineering analysis, or extensive stakeholder consultation because that were beyond the scope of our preliminary study. Simply, we just refer to some of the good quality existing literature, including one report, technical report by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the US, as well as a academic paper published at International Journal of Hydrogen Energy. So for the capacity factor without curtailment, we set it to be 60%. And for the curtailment scenarios, we set 3 hypothetical scenarios, 20%, 30%, and 40% respectively. And the hydrogen production efficiency was assumed to be 50 kilowatts hour per kilogram hydrogen based on the estimates by the IEA and IRENA. So with these assumptions, it was quite straightforward to come up with the ballpark figures of the estimate of the total potential. For the hydropower to power pathway, a large quantity of electricity can be generated from the stored hydrogen. The expected expansion of stored capacity will give us a generally increasing trend of the ratio of power generated by hydrogen to the total forecasted power demand in Nepal over the next 20, 30 years. In terms of the mobility pathway, with the assumptions on fuel economy, statistics on the vehicle stock, driving distance, and so on, the target of electrifying 20% of cars and buses in Nepal would have a demand for hydrogen in the range of roughly 8% to 17% of the total available hydrogen in year 2025. So let me conclude by acknowledging that what we have done is just a basic preliminary study, which aims to raise the awareness of stakeholders and policymakers. Therefore, we didn't do any sophisticated modeling, detailed engineering analysis. We didn't conduct extensive stakeholder consultation. So going forward, there's a need for further studies to better evaluate the technical feasibility and the economic viability of developing the hydrogen value chain in Nepal in a more comprehensive and in-depth manner. Some key aspects should include a better understanding of possible future cost reduction potential of different types of electrolyzers, a better estimate of the potential quantity of the otherwise curtailed surplus hydropower amount, economics of seasonal storage of hydrogen for re-electrification during the dry season in Nepal as compared to other possible opportunities, as well as electrolyzers that can provide ancillary services to the power system. In fact, this is quite a major value that can be added by the application of electrolyzer in the power system. For the transport sector, certainly there's a need to do a thorough stock taking of existing vehicle stock, such as the total number, age distribution, fuel economy, driving distance, possible future traffic demand, and so on. All of these will help to inform a better estimate of the hydrogen value chain in Nepal's transport sector. And finally, it is certainly useful to explore other potential opportunities of hydrogen deployment, such as hydropower to fuel and hydropower to industry, not only in Nepal, but also in the context of other developing countries in the region with similar energy resources and energy challenges to Nepal. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wee, for your very insightful discussion on these technologies, which is very, very important in the present context. I think this is a very, very kind of powerful presentation that you have made to clearly identify that what is the importance of these new technologies in the region. And it is certainly true that it is not only for Nepal, but it requires to be promoted and investigated for other developing countries in this region. And it will really help the achievement of these NDC and SDG targets. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now I'd like to move to the next presentation by Max and Zilia together. Max, over to you. Please introduce yourself, and its floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everybody. My name is John Maxwell. I'm a lawyer. I'm a partner at the law firm Linklaters, and I head up our Asia Energy and Infrastructure team. And I'm joined today by Zilia Sim, a very close colleague of mine and a counsel in the same team in Asia. Today, we're very pleased to talk to you about the exciting developments in energy storage and what this means for the power sector as the world, as we know, increasingly transitions to cleaner, more sustainable forms of energy. In this brief presentation, we will touch on, and it does need to be brief, but we will touch on the two main drivers behind the growth in energy storage, some data showing the recent growth in the industry, and the potential for energy storage, depending on the applicable regulatory regime, to potentially generate multiple sources of revenue. Some think tanks, will come on to this, have identified that energy storage potentially could derive revenue from 13 different uses. And then finally, some of the key issues relevant to investing and financing in energy storage based on our experience and some of the early projects in Europe and elsewhere. So if we move to slide 2, just a little bit of background. Energy storage, of course, refers to the capture of energy for conversion into power at a later time. It is, of course, not a new concept. Hydro and lead acid batteries have been around for a very long time. However, the two main drivers behind the recent growth in the industry are, firstly, and rather obviously, the continuing increase of renewables and the need to match the variable output from renewable power with grid capacity and/or power demand. And just to expand on this briefly, storage facilities can dispatch stored power onto the grid at times when there is insufficient sun or wind. Renewables are intermittent, as we all know, and if they are unable to generate where there is no sun or wind, storage facilities can make up the gap. Storage facilities can also store excess power. So if there is in fact too much power being generated at times of low demand, that can then be dispatched at a later time to help meet peak demand. So they can be used on both sides. I think the other thing to note here is that batteries are a much more responsive and a much cheaper way of maintaining, and much cheaper to maintain than using conventional power plants for these purposes. Much more responsive, and they are cheaper in meeting peak demand and/or storing. The second main driver for the growth in battery storage is, of course, the growth in the use of electric vehicles. Everybody will have their own views about how quickly. My own personal hunch is that we really are going to see, whether the word is tipping point, but it's becoming very real now. And the technological advances have seen rapid increases in the range of batteries. The range is up to 400 miles for some of the most advanced, I think Tesla. And it seems to me, at least, that 600 miles range will not be too far off. If we go to the next slide, just a very quick couple of words on the state of the market. So this slide shows the growth in the deployment of energy storage from about 200 megawatts in 2013 to over 3 gigawatts in 2018, and of course still growing. And battery storage has typically either been developed together with an integrated power plant or new transmission infrastructure, or what is called behind the meter storage. This refers to energy storage that's installed by the end user, by you or me at home, rather than with the grid or with the generator. And as I say, the most common example is a domestic user having an energy storage capacity at home. If we move on to slide 4, so this slide briefly shows the technology mix of the different types of storage. As we've said, lithium battery storage has dominated the market in the last few years. It's been driven by the fall in the costs of lithium-ion batteries and improvements in technology, which have allowed for larger scale battery storage plants that remain economically viable. However, there are benefits, and we've been hearing about some of them just a moment or two ago, about other different types of technologies. For example, alternative technologies can offer potentially much longer battery lifetimes, longer power discharge times, and potentially also a lower environmental impact once the environmental footprint of the lithium-ion battery production is taken into account. And then the slide 5, before I hand over to Cecilia, actually this slide is a little hard to follow, and I won't go into it in detail, but what it does show is that various think tanks and other research institutes have identified up to 13 value streams that can be derived by energy storage. The wide range, and as I said earlier, driven by the regulatory environment in which they are operating. And this wide range of potential revenue streams is often referred to as value stacking or revenue stacking. And with that, I was going to conclude and hand over to Zilia, who will touch on some of the key issues in investing or financing in energy storage projects. Over to you, Zilia.
Thank you very much, John. So what we thought we would do now is just spend a little bit of time to give you a flavor of what are some of the policy and regulatory issues that have come up in this space, as well as some of the key considerations that people have looked at when looking at investing or financing energy storage systems. Now, one of the key issues that investors and financiers in energy storage systems have had to navigate is really the issue of regulatory uncertainty. The difficulty for existing regulatory regimes when looking at an energy storage system is really how do you classify energy storage? On the one hand, energy storage systems could be viewed as a generation asset because power is being supplied from the battery into the grid. On the other hand, you also have energy storage systems providing grid services, which is really more relevant to transmission. So this has led to uncertainty when looking at energy storage, whether it should be treated as a generation asset, a load asset, or a transmission asset. Now, why does this actually matter? From a regulatory perspective, this affects the kind of license that may be obtained, and from there, the type of service that the storage system can provide. This also has an impact on the kind of planning permissions that you can apply for, which will ultimately restrict how the project operates. So in the UK, the regulator Ofgem has been looking at addressing these issues really by adding a formal definition of energy storage, as well as allowing storage to be a subset of generation under generation licenses. So whilst these changes are obviously positive, there are some in the market who say, well, actually, really, energy storage should be treated as a separate asset in and of itself, given the uniqueness of energy storage in terms of the variety of services that it can provide. So in Australia, for instance, what is expected is that the national electricity rules will be amended to create a new regime for energy storage systems. The other point that's also worth noting is that when the regulators in the UK and elsewhere were looking at changes to the regulatory system to cater for energy storage, there was a particular focus on ensuring that you didn't have a definition of energy storage that favored one particular technology over the other. So this was key in ensuring that the regulatory regime itself does not inadvertently discourage research and development into other forms of storage technologies just by taking into account lithium-ion battery storage just because that's the dominant form as of this time. Of course, however, the most important role that policy and regulatory frameworks play is encouraging private sector investment in energy storage systems through ensuring that there are appropriate financial incentives. So we're not going to come on this when we look at the key considerations when looking to invest or finance energy storage systems. As with any project, an investor will look at the financial modeling of a project's revenues when deciding whether to invest in a project. The UK market, for example, operates primarily on a merchant basis. So it is possible to have some degree of contracted revenues through short-term contracts for grid services. These are for a short period of about 1 year on an auction basis. However, the experience there has been as more battery storage systems enter the market, the price has come down. So increasingly, investors in the UK market are looking towards merchant opportunities as a key source of revenue. And in particular, the one area they're looking at is what's called arbitrage, where the battery storage system is charged at times when the electricity price is low and then discharged when the price is high. Now, the challenge for an investor when you're looking at that sort of model is really how do you value and how you forecast such revenues given the level of uncertainty. So instead, what you have seen in some other jurisdictions and places like Jordan and Australia, what they've instead opted for is really a PPA style structure, where in the case of Australia, you have a long-term contract with fixed capacity payments, and the off-taker has the ability to control charging and discharging of the storage system. In both cases, there's no sort of right or wrong with whether you go down the merchant route or long-term regulated route. It very much depends on the local circumstances and the local priorities and conditions, taking into account, how easy it is for investor penetration and financing penetration. What we see more in this part of the world, as John mentioned, is energy storage attached to one or more renewables projects. This is particularly where hybrid renewables and energy storage projects are being used as a means of electrifying remote areas or to address some of the issues around intermittency because of wind and solar. When you're looking at procuring a hybrid project or investing in a hybrid project, it's important to consider whether you're going to have a single revenue stream or separate revenue streams for the power generation and the energy storage component. This will impact, for example, your ability to get project finance to fund the energy storage component if revenues are less certain. But that said, the energy storage component, particularly if you're looking at things like that, lithium-ion battery storage, has a comparatively lower capex, and you also get the added benefit through the additional variety of services that you have through having an attached energy storage system. In terms of construction, so the contractor of a battery storage plant is often different from the battery manufacturer. Contractors generally have been reluctant to provide a wrap in respect of batteries. So this means that developers will often have to look to the warranties from the battery manufacturer themselves. That said, this is no different to the way wind is being financed at the moment, where you have separate warranty packages for the turbines and the balance of plant. Performance warranties from battery manufacturers can be limited. The operating history for particularly large-scale battery storage systems is not that long. And the scope of the performance warranties also need to be very carefully assessed against the operating conditions and demands of the battery storage system. So for instance, battery storage, the warranties are usually linked to the number of cycles per day. So when looking at whether that is realistic, you have to look at your operational parameters and the number of cycles you expect your plant to be working per day and how that compares with your warranty coverage. As battery storage plants are often located in places like business parks or town outskirts, a number of battery storage plants have encountered planning issues as the noise levels have been a bit higher than what has been permitted. So compliance with noise level requirements, depending on your location, will also need to be something that is factored into as part of your warranty package and part of the overall design. Lithium-ion batteries have a useful lifespan of anywhere between 5 to 15 years, depends on use. Where a battery storage system is attached to a renewables project with a long-term PPA, this would mean that batteries will need to be replaced at some point during the term of the PPA. Lithium-ion batteries in particular are modular, so they are replaceable. The focus has been a lot more on the risk of latent defects. In addition, one of the recent hot topics, particularly in the context of batteries, which John touched on, is how batteries can be recycled or repurposed when they have reached the end of their useful lifespan, especially given the environmental impact of the chemicals contained in batteries, particularly lithium-ion. And just from a broader environmental and social perspective, there's been a focus on supply chain issues, particularly with the manufacturing of lithium-ion batteries, given the potential for lithium and cobalt to be sourced from conflict zones. Safety has also been a consideration for lithium-ion. There have been incidents of explosions in battery plants that took place in South Korea. Investigations into that suggested more to do with how the plants were operated than the batteries themselves. So ensuring that there are robust operation and maintenance arrangements to ensure overall safety is also important as part of the project. So in summary, energy storage really plays a vital role in the energy transition as we move towards a lower carbon footprint in the power sector. It's an area where the technologies continue to evolve. Markets and regulations have to similarly evolve with it and keep pace with the change. But what we have hoped that we have done here is just to give you a basic kind of framework to really start thinking about these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Max and Zilia. This is very, very important topic that you have covered, because nowadays storage is perhaps one of the single most important factor for promoting renewable energy and how the renewable energy can come into the broader aspect of its utilization and generation as well. Thank you very much for your very insightful, both from the technology side as well as from the regulatory side, because regulations and the pricing, this is quite unknown to the people in the context of the storage, because this is not too much discussed. We mostly covered the technology side, but not the regulatory side. Thank you very much for this insight. Now, actually, we have received a couple of very interesting, though we do not have much time because we have to quickly move to the panel discussions, but I can't resist myself to respond a couple of questions that has been raised by our respected viewers. So there are 3 or 4 very interesting questions. I'll ask we to respond that the questions has come directly. If we can quickly just take a minute to respond to that question before we move to the panel discussion. No, not required. Yeah. The question is that how cost effective is to produce electricity by hydrogen? The cost of hydrogen turbines is high now. So do you have any idea that if you can respond to this question, the cost effectiveness of producing electricity from hydrogen? This is to Mr. Wee. Yeah.
Hello. I think this is still a topic that remains a lot of, remains to be further researched. I think so far the cost is certainly pretty high and may not be so viable compared to other potential technologies. But I think one of the biggest added value of using the hydrogen to generate electricity is that it provides the opportunity of storing the otherwise curtailed renewable energy, such as supplies hydropower. So, so this I think in a way helps to avoid curtailment, as well as to increase the security, energy security that is being faced by many countries, especially developing countries like Nepal and other DMCs in this region. But I agree with this gentleman that a lot more remains to be done to study a possible reducing curve of the cost.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Wei, for your response. And I have a couple of other questions, but before I'd just like to select one more very interesting question that is related to the storage, and that either Zilia or Max, either of you can respond to this. So the question is basically that, have you considered all types of storage systems like battery, hydrogen, chemicals, pumped hydro, etc.? Because I know there are multiple types of storage systems. So how you differentiate these technologies in your analysis, and how you can respond to that? So
thanks. Yeah, no, actually, yeah, thanks. That's actually a really good question and a really, really good point. I mean, due to constraints in time, a lot of the points that we flagged, particularly around things like the environmental and social issues, a lot of that focus on lithium ion, simply because that is the most dominant form at the moment, given the low cost of lithium ion batteries, which meant that you have been able to get a larger scale battery plants. But it's completely right that there are, lithium ion battery storage by no means is the most perfect solution to some of the things that the energy storage is trying to address. And other technologies are equally important. The advantages of hydrogen, as we talked about in the context of Nepal, and the fact that it does allow for longer term storage, and this time shifting factor, all of that matters. So some of the points that we mentioned earlier around the regulatory framework, that obviously applies to any form of of energy storage, but some of the points we mentioned around some of the construction issues and what people have experienced, that's really more about the battery lithium ion context.
Yeah, actually, this is a very kind of a elaborative topic, and I think this could have a separate session altogether. That yes. I very much understand. It is very difficult to answer all these questions in a very short term, but I think, but this is a question that is a very, very relevant question that has been asked. And I really do not have much time to continue this session. We have to move to the panel discussion right away. And just before we move to the panel discussion, there is one question that was also been asked. There are a couple of asked to me also. I'll just answer in in a couple of seconds. That the question was that, can India and China go more aggressive in terms of having more renewable energy share by 2030? So I must say that India and China both are, I think, doing great. I think in my presentation also I have showed that these are the two countries where really the renewable energy has picked up compared to the other countries. So definitely these two countries should take the leading role. India and China both, I'm sure that these two countries are taking it. But I can also say the other countries should also follow the path in terms of achieving our greater the global objective of emissions reduction as well as clean fuel. So I must thank all my presenters for excellent presentation and for excellent deliberation in terms of a very, very important the time of the the very timely topic. And right now we have to quickly move to the panel discussion, which is also equally very, very interesting. So. So can we move to the panel discussion right away? So I think there are a couple of the way that we are going to now have this panel discussion is that we have a set of questions that we are going to discuss in this panel. So if those questions will be up in the screen for the panelists. So we have the panelists who will be joining us to discuss this, and I will request all the panelists to respond to either all the questions one by one, or maybe the topic of your interest, not necessarily that all the questions has to be answered by everyone, but you can prioritize your response and you can start discussing. The idea is that initially everyone can talk about, we have around half an hour, and so we can talk about 5-6 minutes individually, and then we can have another round of wrap-up discussion at the end. So can I have the slides up for the presentation? So okay. So we have our distinguished panels here. So that includes, I think, we have the panelists along with us. We have the presenters, myself, then Zillian, John, and Mr. Jiang, and Florian K. So these are the panelists right now we have in this session, and we'll be discussing these topics, which is mostly focusing on that what are the key technology portfolio roadmaps that is expected in this region to achieve the NDC and SDG 7 targets. So there are basically 5 questions, 5 different categories of questions that we have set, and we'll be asking the panelists to respond to one of these questions or multiple questions, whatever they like, and we'd like to hear from these experts. So now I'd like to start asking these from, because we already heard 3 of our presenters, but I'd like to go directly to Mr. Jiang first, that if you can respond to these very interesting questions that has been put up for your discussion. So Mr. Jiang, so if you can quickly introduce yourself and then you can respond to any of these questions that has been raised.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Zhang Xian. I'm from Ministry of Science and Technology, the Administrative Center for China's Region 21. I'm very glad to be here to meet you all online in this special time. I would like to talk about something about the new emerging technologies. As our colleagues have already introduced the hydrogen energy storage, and here I would like to add one more technologies: carbon capture and storage, CCUS technologies. We all know that probably CCS technology currently is the only technology can realize the low carbon and large scale utilization of the fossil fuel at the moment. But this kind of technology it's got 3 challenges: high cost, high energy penalty, and high risks. For developing country and developed country must work together to promote this kind of technology development. So currently, all over the world, we have already got 37 large-scale demonstration of CCS projects, but most of them are in developed countries. In Asia area, to my knowledge, there's no large-scale integrated CCS technology demonstration project at the moment. So developed countries probably can help developed countries to do some technology transfer related to CCUS technology. This can help us to to deal with the carbon reduction in Asia area. And also I noticed that some people asked why China and not go for the aggressive renewable energy share at the moment, as just an India answered that question. I also like to give some points about this question as well. In the last 30 years, all over the world, the share of the renewable energy increased from 20% to 20%. This number is according to the REA executive officer, Fatih. So we can see it's very difficult to increase the renewable energy share at the moment. In the last 30 years, China increased the share from 9% to 40%. It's 5% increase. So actually, this is very, very difficult for China already. We lost of effort. China at the moment is the largest solar power generation country, and largest wind power generation country, and also largest hydro power generation country. But for us, if we go for more aggressive share for the new renewable energy, probably will affect the energy security for China. So step by step, probably is better choice for both India and China at the moment. But we do in the right direction at the moment. And also, I would like to talking about the roadmap. A roadmap should be considered as kind of policy or regulatory. And so we all know that for the clean energy technology development, policy probably is the most important thing to promote the technology development. So if we got the technology roadmap for the country, and probably can release the positive signal to all the stakeholders, and what we're going to do, and the low carbon is the right direction. This will be very helpful for the technology development. And also, I believe, I would like to share some experience from China. I mean, last year, we just released the national roadmap for the CCS technology development in China. And during the process, we're doing the roadmap, the design stage, and also the release stage. We found three things very important. The first thing is how to bring people together. For CCS technology, most stakeholders are large company, state-owned company, and the boss usually busy. It's very difficult to bring all the people together. If you ask them to sit down together to do the roadmap, this is a very good opportunity, to get people together. And the second thing is set up the common visions. And people got different consideration, and to persuade them to agree to reduce carbon dioxide emission, and it's very difficult. It takes time. And by doing the roadmap, we bring people together to create the common view, and this is very important. And the third thing is about the how to ask people to clarify the responsibilities and to do the cost sharing. We all know that CCS technology, more than 80% cost is rely on the capture sector. For the storage sector or UR sector, the oil field even can get profit. So how to divide the benefit and the cost between or among the stakeholders is very important. By doing the roadmap, we can do this. So I just want to share some experience. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jiang, for your very insightful, and this is quite an interesting point that you have raised. That in fact, it is known to everyone that China is really doing great in terms of the renewables, and it is very interesting to know that you have already working towards that roadmap of CCS. That is very, very important. Technology in terms of emissions reductions. So now I'd like to move to Mr. Florian Kidd from ADB. Florian, actually, I'd like to ask, though there are 5 areas of discussion points, but I could not resist myself to ask a specific area to start with, which is related to that can technology roadmaps specific to the demand side provide a more effective way of transition to a low carbon pathways, because we really hear a lot of things from the supply side. As you can understand, the majority of the effort is in the supply side, but in terms of NDC and its SDG, demand side has a very, very important role to play, but unfortunately, comparatively less effort is given to that. So I'd like to ask you to start from that question. Florian, over to you. Please introduce yourself for a second and then please start.
Thanks, Anindita, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are in these times. My name is Florian Kidd. I'm an energy sector specialist at the ADB, and I'm outposted and resident in the Indonesia resident mission in Jakarta. So I work mainly on Indonesia. I fully agree with you, Anindita. The demand side is a key aspect of not only reducing emissions, but also reducing demand, investments, and the money spent on the energy sector. I mean, this is one of the, I think, responses that is still lacking in a lot of countries, and that could really have a tremendous impact on how to move forward. Would also reduce the need for new technologies, at least on the supply side. It is, however, one of the most difficult sectors to tackle, as there's nothing to showcase for decision makers, so to say. You can't really open a demand side energy efficiency action by assembling, let's say, 1 million of irons, while you can open a power plant very easily. To your question, how is that best be done and should be pushed? I do think that energy technology roadmaps have a role to play, in that they're an important startup tool for strategic planning and to bring together people, as the first speaker had said, to really understand the opportunities, the cost involved, and the challenges in a rollout, and then how to do this. My comment would be on the roadmaps that it's not enough to just do a roadmap. Often they end up on a shelf. What needs to be done is to really integrate them with the planning documents of the ministries and the key state-owned enterprises in a lot of our development member countries, so that actually these suggestions and plans are being integrated in what a country or a utility or a sector actually wants to do. I actually think there are a number of also very interesting parts. We need to go beyond the energy sector if we want to push that. Not just on the demand side, but also on the industrial side, for example. In that we should not just sell these things as energy-related actions, but also as industrial actions, as opportunities to move up or leapfrog to a new level of manufacturing, which will provide more competitiveness to a country, so that an energy efficient action actually has quite additional benefits for example, the industry involved. It also, I think, in the context that we're talking about a lot in our countries, which is energy pricing, we need to make it clear to decision makers that the less energy people use, the less they pay. So if we can reduce energy consumption per household appliance, we can actually bring more appliances to people, which would increase their quality of living. I would stop there on the demand side, and happy to comment on that more. Give me 2 more points that I wanted to make. The first question was on new and emerging technologies for the transition. I just want to say we need to use all of the technologies available to us. There's hydro, there's geothermal, there's biomass, biogas, and others. they are fully developed and ready. In a lot of our countries, they're still new, so in quotation marks. We need to move on these. And then we can also discuss what needs to be done on really emerging technologies. But in order to deploy emerging technologies in our countries, we need a large-scale effort from the international community to provide the necessary funding for mostly expensive energy solutions at present. The second point that I wanted to make is regarding what can we do in Indonesia. I think there is a big opportunity in a very ocean-based country to integrate new solutions if there is help from the international community. That relates especially to ocean energy and ocean storage. Storage has a key role to play, whichever way, and batteries are hopefully just the start, and we can move on to other forms. Finally, transport is the white elephant in energy because it crosses somehow what we do as energy specialists. And really appreciated the presentation on hydropower to hydrogen. I just wanted to note, and then I also end here, that there's also the opportunity for synthetic fuels. So there will be gas to synthetic fuel, also fueled by hydropower or renewables. So there are a number of new things, and I look forward to hearing more from my colleague and from Miton. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
So thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Florian. Thanks for your intervention in these questions, which is very, very relevant. And I really appreciate your comment on, especially on these new technologies taking together. I think you are telling that all technologies should be considered in together, because it is not something that one single solution is available. And especially these for Indonesia, the ocean technologies and ocean storage, this is also quite promising. And I'm sure that not only Indonesia, all other countries who are having large seashore areas, they can also consider it. Now I'd like to move to Mitong for your interventions. So you can talk about, I think, out of any 5, or you can prioritize by yourself. I just give it up to you. But before that, please introduce yourself quickly.
Yes, hi, hello. My name is Mitong. I've been working mostly in energy efficiency and emissions reduction initiatives in the last 20 years. I'm currently working on a couple of projects in Vietnam. I've been working in Asia for the last 15 years, and in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. So it's been a very interesting and very challenging, but very rewarding area to be working in. It's also, must have to say that it's going to be, I'm not sure how I can, I ended up in this position, which is I have to close the discussion, so very interesting discussion, very wide-ranging. So it's rather challenging for me to try and wrap things up. And I'm also aware of the time, so I'm going to try it and go quickly here. So yes, so I want to wrap up and take a smaller view. And thank you, Florian, for opening the door to the demand side. I think that just let me sort of summarize the situation that a lot of us find ourselves in the countries that we work in, which is that economies are growing, right? But they're all industrializing, so they're very high in energy intensity, and then increasing energy imports. Governments are challenged. They're running up against their loan guarantees. They can't build more power plants or afford new technologies easily. And so, one of the challenges that the projects that I'm working on that we're trying to address is basically we identify that there are opportunities that exist at the municipal level, right? So we're trying to introduce new emerging technologies and energy efficiency technologies at the municipal level. And we're hoping that in addressing these issues at the municipal level, we're opening the way for current technologies as well as new technologies, because the challenge that we're seeing in a number of countries that we're working in, and I'm sure Florian can attest to this, is there's a very, very nascent ESCO industry, right? There's not enough PPP regulations for municipalities to act, so they can't afford projects in general, let alone new, expensive, emerging technologies. And then there's also the weak stakeholder capacities. So what we're trying to do is address all of these in hoping that by doing this roadmap, this approach works for all technologies, be it renewable, be it energy efficient or emerging. However it works, it fits into the grid, because we all know, of course, that the more renewables we integrate into the grid, it's going to be the challenge in the grid needs to be more flexible because of the challenge in sort of integrating renewable is the challenge because of the the fluctuation that the renewables sometimes deliver. So how we're doing that? We're looking specifically at the public sector. So we're working in general to improve regulations, technical standards, and financial instruments for energy efficiency and renewable energy investment. At the municipal level, we're building and supporting provincial level capacities for energy efficiency and renewables. We're doing pilot projects, and we're hoping that doing all this, we're building a climate change mitigation project pipeline. And that at all levels, we're working to increase the capacity of stakeholders. We're trying to open their eyes to new, green, innovative financing options. We're supporting the information and the dissemination of best practices and whatever technologies that we can introduce. What are some international best practices, and then how it all applies to the public sector, because I think this is part of the definitely part of the challenges that we're seeing. It is if you can't you can get some certain things done at the national level, but the opportunities are great at the municipal level that hasn't been addressed. And if we can address this, and there's a synergistic roadmap here between municipal level and the public sector and new technology emerging. If we can do a synergistic roadmap, we can introduce more energy efficiency, more renewable energy, and new technology, and any emerging and new technologies can follow the same path that's being done. So basically, I don't have a lot of new technologies discussion to add to the very interesting discussions that the other presenters have made, but what I'm hoping is that what we're currently doing will be able, with what we've done and the achievements we're hoping to make, will open the road, the market up to whatever new technology that will become more affordable or cost effective as things develop. So anyway, I am mindful that there's not much time left, so I'm going to end here and take questions. So that more of the discussions can happen. But thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really appreciate hearing about new technologies, especially carbon capture, storage, all of it. It's very interesting, and I'm learning so much today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ton. So I think this is very interesting that you raised that, another important point you mentioned about the local level planning, which is very, very important, because we do, in general, we do the national level, even the provincial level planning, but the local level planning, unless it is done properly and integrated to the provincial and national level, then actual implementation fails. This is proved now. So it is no doubt that local level planning is very, very important, and it has to be integrated. Now, we really do not have much time, only 5 minutes left. Before I really quickly need to ask my other panelists one specific question, that if they can quickly respond to that, about the digital technologies, because now after this pandemic is over, now there are new norms and we have to adopt to this for at least God knows how many months or year. So in that context, this digital technology is really going to play a major role in terms of implementing various kind of the policies and plans in the context of energy sector. So I'd like to start with Max, and then move to and then Zilia, if you can quickly respond to that, how you think that the digital technologies are going to take a role in terms of implementing the roadmaps of energy technologies. Over to Max.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you want to take it, Zilia?
Yeah, just for both John and myself, I think digital technologies in the area of storage is actually very, very interesting, particularly when you're looking at what they're having a chance to talk about, which is behind the meter storage. And what you're looking to do is, with all the individual rooftop solars that people have, to aggregate that and use that in the sense of a virtual power plant. Now that has technological challenges, because you have to it goes back to the question of integrating that into the grid, and that's not, it's complicated software, but potentially very, very promising, going back to things that are easy to implement at a municipal level. The key is getting the technology right. But if you do that, then there is a great potential to do things at the local level.
Max, you would like to respond? You have to give anything in this context?
No, but I mean, well, only to say, I mean, we've already seen in parts of the world, the use of algorithms, computers, predicting demand, matching that with expected, generation, renewable revenue generation. And I just think the power of algorithm and that predictive element, it's only going to grow when we're looking at matching demand with expected power, because it just enables you to plan. I mean, and I suspect if you're looking at smart cities and so forth, what they're trying to do is create this perfect model where they are always able to match their demand with the renewable energy sources, combined with storage and so forth. So they're never looking at having idle capacity, diesel and so forth on standby, inefficient standby facilities, in order to meet variable demand and or variable revenue generation, where they're very dependent on renewables.
Right. Thank you, Max. Now, can you quickly comment on this digital thing? Because after that, I have to wrap up. Yeah.
I think digital technology, they collect massive amount of data for analysis, which can produce huge benefits, such as the enhanced accountability and flexibility of energy infrastructure. For example, we have AIs and big data machine learning, which can increase the accuracy of the forecasting of renewable energy. We have Internet of Things, which can enable real-time communication. I think all of these play a very big in terms of bring together, or sort of coupling or integrating the power sector with those major energy consuming sectors, such as the transport sector, building and the industry, through advanced sensing, real-time communication, and sophisticated advancing control technologies, and so. So by doing so, I think fuel switching can be enabled, can be realized, and energy efficiency can be improved, and power system flexibility can be improved. All of these can contribute to reduce the overall primary energy consumption by the whole economy, and thereby being able to contribute to the economy-wide decarbonization.
Right. I think this is a very, very important topic. I think we are really coming to the end of this session. We just have a minute to close it. Before I close, I need to, as a moderator, this is my responsibility to summarize first and then thank you all. So quickly summarize that we have basically three very specific presentations in this session. apart from a generic one, the futuristic scenario presentation that was done by myself. We also talked about the particular technology of the hydrogen fuels, which is very, very important. And then we talked about the storage. These are the two pillar technologies, in my opinion, for the coming years. Based on these, we need to move forward in terms of the renewables. Also, we have a very eminent panelist who discussed about their experiences, and they're specifically from Vietnam and for Indonesia. They're rightly working on the ground, and they have shared. And I also thank Mr. Maiton, who discussed about his project, who is actively working in this area for several years, and his hands-on experience really enriched our discussion. So we talked about that. We came to know from Mr. Xiang also that China is really actively working in terms of developing the new renewable technologies, including they're planning on the CCS roadmaps, which is very, very encouraging. I didn't know about this, but I really personally look forward to this particular document. And also we talked about that. Florian talked about the ocean technologies for Indonesia, and I am sure that this technology is also can be applied to the different other countries in the South Asia region. There are a lot of countries who are having a huge shore area, so the seashores, that should be an opportunity for these countries. And so finally, I'd like to thank to all my panelists and presenters for your excellent presentations and deliberations. And thanks, ADB, for providing us this excellent platform to share our thoughts and views and discuss. And I'm sure all our presentations will be available, because I'm seeing a couple of questions that how these presentations will be available to their viewers. I think SCF Secretariat will make it available to all of them. And if anyone has any questions, I think there is a open platform available in the SCF virtual platform to raise the questions to the speakers directly. You all know our contacts now, so we'll be looking forward to these questions, and we'll be happy to answer. It is not possible to answer all the questions in this forum, but we'll be very happy to answer it. So I'd like to thank all of you, and thank you very much. And I'd like to close these sessions for the now. Thank you very much.